What's up, everybody? My name is Juwan Rohan, and this is the Misguided Podcast. We're intending to guide you to a better future. I'm sitting here with Angel Radcliffe, business strategist and financial educator. How you doing today?
I'm amazing. How are you?
Um, I am doing, let's say, busy. I am busy. Yeah, I had to take the kids to school this morning, and like it's their second day at school. So, well, the older one, but the lines are just crazy. Like traffic right now is just insane. So now I'm back home. I'm ready to get down to some business. How's your morning starting? What time is it out there? 11?
It's noon. I'm on Central Time. So coming up on 12 o'clock. It's a rainy day in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas. How long you been in Dallas?
I've been in Dallas for a bit over 10 years now, originally from Chicago. And Dallas is, I have to say, it's grown on me. When I first moved here, I did not like it. Very slow city. Still a slow city, but it's definitely growing. Definitely one of the top places to live right now.
Yeah, that's cool. I have my mixed emotions on Texas in general. But I've been there plenty of times and would travel there and had some really interesting experiences. And Dallas is not a big fan of Dallas, but I guess if you're there for 10 years, it has to grow on you in some type of way, you know? I'm a big fan of Austin. I love Austin.
I do too. So I always tell everyone, Austin is like a mix of, it reminds me of like Santa Monica and College Town.
Yeah.
That's like the vibes of Austin.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And yeah, I love how like vibrant it is, right? But yeah, that's cool. So originally from Chicago, you said?
I am.
Cool. And what made you move to Dallas? Like that's a huge culture change, but like that's just a huge change.
Let's see. We don't have enough time on this podcast. No.
You give me the bullet points.
No. So I'll keep it short. Definitely, and I don't know if you can relate, but I'm sure listeners can probably relate. Graduating from college and definitely just trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, and not really being given that opportunity. Of course, when you sort of grow up, and especially as a first generation college student, and you don't have anyone in your family to really guide you in a certain direction as far as what steps you should be taking, you're sort of left figuring things out on your own. And that's where I was. I didn't have the guidance as far as like proper internships I should do to obtain a certain job. I wanted to work in corporate finance. Well, no one told me I should be like doing those internships in college. I was doing things college students do. And so when I graduated, it was like, oh, well, where did you intern? And I was like, what? Like, I mean, I worked in retail, but I ended up working in human resources, which is really insane. I had no human resource experience. It was my first job after college, and I was unable to get the job I actually wanted. And I was being told you need experience. And I said, how do you get a job? How do you get the experience to get a job if no one gives you the opportunity? Yeah. Right. And so I had a family member who lived in Texas. We came to visit around Christmas, which in Illinois, it's freezing, blizzard. And we came to Dallas and it was 85 degrees. And I was like, I'm moving here. Honestly, it was a split decision. Within 1 month, I had quit my job, packed my things, and moved to Texas. And my goal was, I should say I was enrolled in a graduate program at the time. And my goal was to only spend 6 months in Texas. I said, let me just spend 6 months. It's a different environment. Maybe I'll meet some new people. Maybe there can be some different opportunities. I went on maybe a few interviews, spoke with a few recruiters, started to attend some networking events. And within 2 weeks of living in Dallas, I ended up with a job at Coca-Cola in corporate finance. Same job.
Way. Coca-Cola. Yes. I worked at Coca-Cola. I worked at Coca-Cola.
Same job I've been trying to get for a year. So I guess fate, and from there sort of built my career, and my professional network is here, and a few business ventures, but Dallas is cool.
How long were you at Coke?
I was there for 2 years before they sort of did a shift in their corporate finance department. They did some outsourcing to Guatemala, and asked me to move to the corporate in Atlanta. And I was like, I just moved to Dallas.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was actually fun. So a lot of great people I met there and actually still talk to you today.
That's cool. Yeah, I was at Coke for 3 years. And now I'm a realtor, but that's crazy. So after Coke, where'd you go? Where'd you end up going?
Oh, so funny story. I'll sum it up. Career wise, I always tell everyone working at Coca-Cola, being in a layoff at such a young age, I was maybe 25 years old. I had never been through a layoff. I know people 40, 50 years old that have never been through a layoff. It really lit a fire in me. Of course, that was around the time of the recession that we were going through in this country. And it was taking a while to find another opportunity that would pay very similar to what I was making. And I had always been an entrepreneur, always had these side hustles, but it really pushed me to be an entrepreneur full time. So I spent a year and a half running my own business, and my mom was a real estate agent in Illinois, and she would direct me to things I could do within real estate, which I know you mentioned that you're a notary. So then, yeah, there were so many things you can do in real estate. And still now, being a notary and working on loan closings, and the amount of money that you can make doing that was substantial between, I'd say, 07 2000 to 2011, where you can go sit at a signing and walk out with $300 that you can make in less than an hour. And so I was actually doing that for a year, making $7,000, $8,000 a month, with some other side hustles. So before some laws changed, and
doesn't that just open your eyes though? It's like shit you've never seen, like that much money coming in, and you're like, I don't even know. I wanted this much money, but what do I do with it now? Like,
right?
Where do I park it?
I was only really working like the last 2 weeks of the month, because that's the time of the month people would refinance their loans. And the rest of the time I was traveling and living my life. And then the laws changed and how much you could pass through to a borrower on their settlement statement. And I was like, all right, probably should find another job. So I ended up going to, ironically, work for Pepsi.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I worked for Pepsi. I worked for Chiquita. I worked for a military brokerage. And then I transitioned out of corporate finance after 7 years and into technology consulting, which I'm still doing today. But along that journey, I got into teaching financial literacy, volunteering with a few nonprofits. And so that's been a journey in itself.
Cool. So you said you're in technology consulting. Is that with a company, your own company? Let's get into that.
No, it is with a company.
Okay.
I cannot mention. It's a global tech company. And I work in financial transformation. So really working with large Fortune 100, 500 companies and their accounting, finance departments, transforming their accounting processes specifically related to SAP. So that's my specialty.
Okay. What made you, so like seeing how well the entrepreneurship was going, what made you continue to just like, I don't know if it's a 9-to-5 or you're contracted, but what made you continue to work for a corporation?
So there's some meat there. So we can unpack.
I always say keep your 9-to-5, right, in quotations, as long as you can, but I would love to hear your opinion.
Right. And I have my own theory. Everyone has their own theory. I say a 9-to-5 is also a stream of income. Mm-hmm. So some people don't view it that way. Some people will say, quit your job, do your side business. Of course, I've done that before. I tell everyone I was a full-time entrepreneur 2 times in my life. One time involuntarily when I was laid off from Coca-Cola. The second time voluntarily. In 2015, I actually quit my job. When I left corporate finance. I knew I didn't want to work in corporate finance anymore. I wanted to do something a bit more exciting. I've always had a love for technology as well. And I wasn't receiving those opportunities at the place I was working. So just put my foot out to my networking, letting them know what I wanted to do and what my interests were, and doing some upskilling on my own. But I took a year off in 2015 to work on my branding for not my podcast. I didn't have the podcast yet, but working on my branding. So on the financial literacy side. And so I knew I wanted to brand myself. I didn't know how. And at that time, I saw so many people like branding themselves, and they had the blogs, and I was like, how do you do this? And I started live streaming. And from there came courses and books and partnerships, and I was working with credit bureaus, and I had sponsorships and influencer deals. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. And opened my eyes to so many things and so many different streams of income. And what I was doing on a volunteer basis, as far as speaking on financial literacy, I then started to charge and host workshops. And that had never really crossed my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned something before we started recording, as far as surrounding yourself with certain people. I had started to surround myself with a different group of people. So people who had a different mindset, people who were thinking in this entrepreneurial mindset, or who were driven to earn multiple streams of income. When they would come to me and say, you're giving all of this information away for free. Do you know people will pay you for this? And I'm like, what? You can find this on the internet.
Yeah.
And someone told me, like, well, honestly, you can find anything on the internet. People still buy books, but you can still find that book on the internet. And I never thought about it that way. And I was like, you have a point here. So really that year was so transformative for me in really figuring out the things that I wanted to do, how I wanted to live my life and my purpose. But also, since I was a first generation college student, I have people in my family who look up to me. I have nieces, nephews. I have 10 nieces and nephews. I have siblings. And I'm always stressing a message to them to, stay in school, do the best they can. Of course, college is not for everyone. Some people will be successful on the entrepreneurial path, but I wanted to prove that you can do both and you can be successful in both. And I've never really hated working in corporate America. I had some challenges getting to the point of doing the things that I wanted to do. And so I had to do some self-reflection and saying, okay, why was I having these challenges? And what was really stopping me from advancing? And one of those things was not building my networks properly. And I think that is a huge hindrance, especially in the African-American community, because sometimes we push people away, whereas maybe we're not showing up at the happy hours or we're not as open. And so
can we dive into that a little bit more? Can we dive into maybe like
we can.
Some
people don't realize like your network is your net worth. And it dawned on me, and I was like, you know what? I was so successful that year of branding. And I was like, well, if I can be successful at this, I can be successful in corporate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's definitely true. What do you think was holding you back from building that network? Like, I want to know from a women in business standpoint. Do you think it had anything to do with you being a woman in the corporate world?
Well, I do think being a woman, definitely being a minority woman, working in finance, you don't see a lot of women, you don't see a lot of minority women, you see white male. And what's ironic to that, technology is the same way. You're just now starting to see more minorities in technology and all these STEM programs, but there's some of the same challenges. And actually, I was just featured in an article in Yahoo Finance on that, on leadership, and discuss some of those challenges. So that would be a good read for anyone who's wanting to look into that. But
can you send me that after? I'll put it in the show notes.
Definitely. But one thing that I realized is that I wasn't being open. And I think sometimes in our communities, we're taught, you're not supposed to be at work to make friends, or you don't tell people your business, which you don't have to. And I always say there's a fine line. So there's a certain way to do things. And maybe sometimes we're not necessarily taught the proper way to build those relationships without delving so much into the details of our personal lives. So it's either, from what I've seen with people in my network, either they completely close themselves off or they're extremely way too open. And then either way, either extreme, they're X'd out of that promotion or X'd out of that circle at work. So I've seen some crazy things with people getting, maybe drinking a bit too much at the happy hours, or even just declining coming to the company party or whatever it is. But I always say, give a little bit. You don't have to tell people your entire life or what you did for the weekend, but say hello and be friendly and open the door for those relationships and invite someone for coffee. There's certain things that you can do to keep a professional relationship. And I was never taught those things. So I had no idea. And I was like, okay, I was failing so bad in that department, and relationship building it's a huge impact, especially if you're wanting to advance your career and you're wanting to move into leadership or to that executive level. No one wants someone in a position who's bad at being personable.
Yeah. And and it's like society really teaches us the opposite, right? They teach us like to write someone off the moment they, say something weird, or the way they look, right? They always teach us to like judge and separate ourselves in a way. And so what I try and preach is that you need to put yourself in as many different groups as possible. You need to be able to get along with many different people. For me, it's important to be able to sit in a room full of all white people and not feel uncomfortable. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like I can do that, and I know how to act. I know how to, you know what I mean? Now, there's a difference of like, being treated differently, right? But just a lot of people from our neighborhoods would be scared as shit to go sit at a table and talk business with some white people, right? Like that's just unheard of, right?
Right.
And so like I always preach, like, you have to learn how to put yourself in a different environment, and that's really the best education.
It is understanding different cultures, being comfortable to have a conversation, because sometimes, especially if you grew up in a more urban community, we sometimes look at other races as people are out to get us, and that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And so, and I can say growing up, I never had the exposure of being in diverse environments. I was more so an introvert. What's really ironic, as you grow up and you look at how you change, you do that self-reflection. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, one of my girlfriends. We've been friends since we were 12 years old, and we were just reflecting on the changes we've made throughout life. And I was such an introvert. I would never talk to anyone. And she was like, I can't believe that you're doing all these things. She was like, you were never the type to go and talk to anyone. And I can walk in a room and literally talk to anyone, any race, any sex, about any topic. And it's crazy. Yeah.
No, you need that in your arsenal. You need that in your tool of bags. But I feel it. So how were you actually first introduced to financial literacy?
I will say, realizing in my 20s, facing the reality that I was in debt. I graduated college, of course, with student loan debt, but
where'd you go?
Massive credit card debt. I went to Illinois State University. And so after that, I picked up a graduate program at DePaul. Did not finish at DePaul. I finished at an online program at Strayer University. Took out student loans for that particular program, which if I could go back and turn back the hands of time, I would have waited.
They don't teach you not to take out student loans.
Right. I would have went through an employer-sponsored program or something. But in my mind, I was thinking like, okay, the faster I can get a degree and the faster I can get an advanced degree, the more money I can make, which is not always true.
Now, you're probably not even doing anything with your degree. What was your degree?
My degree was business management, and my master's is an MBA. So there's some things where
you're one of the rare people. You're one of the rare people. I like talk to people all the time who don't do anything with their degree, and the best reason to go to college was just to meet people and network.
Well, I think I will say, working in tech now, of course, there's people in tech who don't have a master's degree, but when I was on the financial side, of course, several people on the financial side, they were working on their master's and even going towards their CFP. And so at that particular time, when I was on that career track, it was definitely needed for me to advance. But looking back and self-reflecting, I was like, oh my gosh, but I can't cry over spilled milk, but really realizing that I was in debt and I didn't know how to get out of debt. It was always like I'd pay off a bill and then I'd accumulate another bill. And it was a cycle. It was an ongoing cycle until I was maybe 27 or 28 years old. And I was like, how the heck do I get out of this? And had a conversation with a coworker who was older than me. She was in her 40s at the time. And I'm thinking, okay, this lady's older than me. She must know what to do or how to guide me. Yep. That's not always true. Someone who's older doesn't necessarily have the information to guide you. Her and her husband
Or
were
they have
also in debt.
outdated information.
Yes. Yep. Outdated information. Her and her husband were in debt. They were getting ready to go through a foreclosure. And I was like, what in the heck? And so really, I started to go through my own process of getting out of debt and teaching myself, because I realized so many people didn't know. And then I was like, people don't talk about money. People are not talking about financial issues. I was asking my friends, well, how much are your credit card payments? How much are your debt payments? How much is your car payment? And those aren't conversations that we normally have. And I'm like, we need to normalize that, because I was realizing like, no, it was just like so hush hush. And when we started to have those conversations, we realized, okay, maybe one person maybe had too high of an interest rate. One person went to one of those buy here, what do they call it? Buy here, pay here loan place, car loan places.
Cash advance. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what is it called? Like I don't want to name a
hard money
place.
Loans, pretty much.
Well, it's a car lot where you pay weekly. I don't know what it's called.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so people were in these crazy financial situations, but no one had ever discussed it. And so when I worked to get myself out of debt and really understood what the credit score meant and how much money I should be saving, because I had zero money in savings. I'm not ashamed to admit it, because, you know, I use my story to teach other people. I did not start building a solid savings until I was almost 30 years old. It was always like I would get my bonus from work. And of course I could.
Where we going, girls? Mexico. I
could stick that in savings, but I was like, okay, I'm going to pay off this credit card. And then it was like, run it back up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't traveling, but yeah, it was like shoes in the closet. At one point, I probably had 200 pairs of shoes in my closet when I was 25 or 26. But
yeah.
but really just going through that journey myself of getting out of debt, and then realizing so many people didn't have the information. And I said, okay, I'm going to start teaching other people how to get themselves out of debt, how to understand their credit report, and that's how the volunteerism came with the nonprofits, local nonprofits here in Dallas. There's one in particular I've been volunteering with for over 10 years, Attitudes and Attire. And it's sort of bloomed from there.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Like, you know, you're 100% right. Money is a taboo topic, and a lot of people don't talk about it. And I think just even the simple conversations and talking more about money and how to navigate money can really help with like starting a lot of people in their journey to financial literacy, right? Financial freedom. So yeah, I 100% agree. And I mean, that's part of the reason why I wrote the book Money Talks, and made it so simple to understand. Like it's literally just a conversation between two kids talking about money, and one kid is teaching the other kid. But I did that because I realized that a lot of people don't want to talk about their finances. A lot of people, when I ask, you know, how much do you make? They don't want to be honest. Or how much are you in debt? They don't want to be honest, right? So when you start to be honest and transparent, right? It's about transparency. When you start to be honest and transparent with yourself, but with others as well, you can kind of really start to solve your problems a lot easier instead of hiding it and, you know, putting a Band-Aid on it. So
that is definitely true. And there's so many people who definitely don't want to discuss how much they have saved up for retirement or 401k. I ask my friends all the time, how much are you saving? Or especially in your 30s, you should have a little bit saved up if you've been working since you were 22. Some people haven't been working since they were 22, but let's say someone who's been working straight out of college, went to school at that normal age, 18 to 22, and you've been contributing. I always ask, how much do you have saved? And some people are like, well, why? Why are you in my business? And I'm like, do you want to discuss this and make sure you're on the right track? Because over the years, and as I've learned, I max out my 401k. I put the IRS maximum in there every year. I take advantage of every tax deduction I can. And what's really crazy is I had this goal a few years ago. You talked about, why did I go back to corporate? And I talked about how I wanted to be successful in both. Well, initially, when I went back to corporate, the goal was, because I was bootstrapping my business, right? And I was like, okay, this lifestyle is not for me. I'm tired of being broke. I need money. But initially, I was like, okay, I'm only going to go back for a year or two, and then I'll go back to full-time entrepreneurship. And then it really dawned on me in those 2 years, like I can be successful in both. So that's why I was like, there's a lot of meat when I was saying there's a lot to unpack. But I said, if I can go back and I can save $100,000 then, you know, I'm going to leave corporate, yada, yada, yada. That's a good cushion. And so I set that as a goal, and I was able to save $100,000 in a year and a half. And I'm still at the company 3.5 years later. And my friends are like, well, you said you were going to quit.
That's crazy. So you saved 100K. Is this like in your savings? Are you talking about 401k? And
so
all
that was not including investments or 401k. That was like savings. I was able to save 40 to 50% of
what were you
paycheck.
Eating? What were you eating? Did you eat?
That's a good question. But I was like so disciplined, and I was like, okay. And that's another thing, when you're wanting to save, you have to be disciplined to reach your goals. And so I was like, okay, no getting my nails done. I was doing my own hair. I cut cable in 2015. I sacrificed so many things.
Can
like,
you send me these selfies of your hair when you did it yourself? I'm gonna just put it as your name right here for
oh
YouTube.
My goodness. But I sacrificed, and I was like, okay, I can save 40 to 50% of each check, and I can be good and max out. I didn't start maxing the 401k until maybe a year later, but putting sizable amount into the 401k and some other investments. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. Well, my life is pretty good. I'm able to balance both, because I had changed my business model to where I was no longer, I don't necessarily do one-on-one with people for financial literacy. I don't charge consumers. That's not a part of what I do. I more so host workshops for organizations and speaking engagements. And so anytime I'm hosting a workshop for consumers, it's probably free, or of course there's like free information online. I feel like I don't want to go out here and charge someone $500 and they're in debt. Trying to figure out how to get out of debt. And like, yeah, let me charge you $500 and $1,000. Sign up for my class. I feel like that's completely ridiculous. But but you know, a lot of the things that I was doing, I was like, okay, I'm able to do this and still work a corporate job and have residual income from some of the things I'm doing, especially, you know, having the books and some digital courses and some of the projects that I have in the works. But it's so amazing that I try to tell other people, like, you can do the same thing. You can set a system up, you can use the skills that you have or the knowledge that you have and build out a side hustle or another business and get out of debt, or whatever your goals are, retire early, pay off your home, or whatever the end goal is.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I dig it. Thank you for being open about your story. I want to jump into the Hella Misguided segment, where I ask the same question to every entrepreneur that comes up here. And that question is, if you were to write a letter to your 18-year-old self, what would be a summary of that letter?
Oh, man. Ooh. I would say, I'm going to do the summarized version. So I'll do the cliff notes, the bullet points.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll say, save your money.
Okay.
Guard your heart.
Okay.
Invest in the stock market.
Yep.
Travel.
Okay.
Travel the world, I should say. And so this is the last one that I will add on here. And so one of my good friends lives by this phrase where he says, get your money up front.
Okay.
Get your money up front.
Does that mean pay yourself first?
Well, when we're talking about savings, it does. So in his philosophy, it means taking on those positions. And I wish I would have known this in my 20s. So taking on those positions that actually are paying a lot of money, so that you can save on the front end and do what you really want to do on the back end of life. So, and I teach this to my mentees who are maybe wanting to come into technology consulting, because it pays a substantial amount of money for someone who's coming out of school, 22 years old, can come out making $80,000, $90,000, and they may want to be a singer or a dancer or go to law school. And it's like, hey, do this for, 3-4 years, save some money, and then go do what you really want to do. You have a nice cushion. You don't have to get into debt. But I wish I would have known that in my 20s. But one of my friends lives by that phrase, and I'm like, love it.
I love that. Get your money up front. I mean, because it could apply to so many different situations, right? Like I thought it was pay yourself first, and then you brought up that.
And you definitely should pay yourself first when you're budgeting. So
yeah, most definitely. No, that's great advice. Great advice. Cool. I do want to talk about your books. You have two books, Balling on a Budget up front and Entrepreneur's Quick Start Guide. So I believe I heard of Balling on a Budget a while ago. I don't know how, don't ask me. But I swear I heard this title before. So can you dive into this one first? Let's talk about this.
Sure. So, Balling on a Budget is actually the first book that I published in 2016. It's actually a financial workbook. So, back when I was live streaming, I used to have a theme for every day I would get on live stream. And I don't know if you remember Periscope, but I used to be on there every day. And I would do Balling on a Budget Wednesdays. And I said, you know what? I'm going to turn this into a workbook, because in my workshops, I didn't necessarily have anything besides like a traditional handout. So I turned a lot of those handouts into a workbook. And so it's now something that I use. I typically will donate to nonprofits, or when I'm going into a speaking engagement, organizations will buy so many for the attendees, but it walks you through those foundational steps of creating a budget and some different ways. I always say, think outside the box, some different ways and strategies that you can start to save money. And your budget definitely should start on paper before moving to that electronic format. So it just walks you through those, again, foundational steps. The other book, Upfront, an Entrepreneur's Quick Start Guide, came out literally a few months later, and it's co-authored with two other entrepreneurs. So it is a few chapters on, I don't want to say major things you need in your business. So we talk about marketing, business strategy, business credit. That's my favorite. And tools you can use for your business. I always say it's more like a pocketbook for entrepreneurs, but
Okay.
I have two other books that I'm working on. And so,
Yeah. You can't disclose that yet, what they are?
Well, one I can, sure. So one book, it's a collaboration with a therapist, that is called Developing a Money Mindset. And the book will be out.
That is fire. Yes. That sounds like some Charlemagne the God type stuff.
It will be out in a few months. And so we've been working on this all summer. And the other one is more of a financial affirmation book. I don't really want to release the name just yet because I don't have a release date.
Okay, yeah.
But a few projects, so many projects that I'm working on. So I'd say for people listening, just to sort of stay tuned.
Yeah, that's wow. I'm very intrigued, and I'm definitely want to read that book. That's another thing that's overlooked in our community is therapists, right? And I've been seeing a therapist and working on like my anxiety, because I get so much anxiety, trying to navigate through all these businesses, and sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough when I'm like doing way too much. And so I just think therapy is like so overlooked. It's definitely helped me see a different perspective. You don't have your friends and family in your ear telling you from a biased point of view. So how do you feel about therapy? Have you been?
So I will say, I think everyone should have a therapist, a non-biased person to speak to. I've definitely I'd say at the beginning of the pandemic, I definitely had to have someone on speed dial. I didn't know what the heck was happening in this world. I was like, what the heck? Yeah. But definitely, and so your mental health also affects the way that it impacts the way that you're spending your money. So in turn, your overall finances, and that's something that we talk about in the book. So think about the people who are going through a death in the family, or a divorce, or even if they just have mental problems in general and go on that downward spiral. Or some people really use shopping as a method of coping, or they use gambling or drinking and drugs. And so that definitely impacts finances. And so we touch on a few things of how that really impacts finances, and even going through a phase of like unlearning, because we're taught so many things as we grow up. And sometimes as you become an adult, you figure out your parents didn't really know what they were talking about. And so that also maybe causes you to have poor financial habits and maybe end up in therapy as well. But
no, you're 100% right. 100% right. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to read your up and coming book, and it looks like your other two books are doing well for you. Is there anything else that let's talk about your podcast really quickly. Do you want to share what your podcast is about?
Sure. So the podcast is Milestones, Motivation, and Money. And the podcast came about from a Facebook group by the same name. The Facebook group has been around for a few years from my live streaming days. Of course, you have to have somewhere to push your audience, and we would do challenges and free like financial workshops in there and having speakers. But I wanted to do something a bit different. And so I had the podcast on the list for a few years. I started it last year and we're in season 2. So we're getting ready to wrap up season 2 in the next month or so. I would say, and a good summary would be, the podcast encompasses not only the mindset for the business owner, but also consumers. So focusing on lifestyle, resiliency, finance, of course, business topics. I love other people to share their stories. It's very much an interview style. So I'm always having some great people on and speaking about finances. I know that your topics are very heavily geared towards like financial literacy. The last few topics of the podcast have been geared towards investing, financial literacy. The most recently released episode was on real estate investing. I've had Terry Igioma on. Not sure if you're familiar with her, but she came on and discussed investing with the stock market. So I've had some really amazing guests on the show, but from all, I'd say, various aspects of finance.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Cool. Well, I look forward to listening, and I definitely saw that real estate one. I'm definitely, that's going to be the first one I check out. So, the audience that's listening, make sure you go check out her podcast. And then can you let everyone know where they can reach you and get a hold of you? Instagram?
Sure. I'm on all social media as Miss RMBA, MISSRMBA. The website is the same. So missrmba.com or angelradcliffe.com. And anyone that has questions, feel free to reach out. Just shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I am very active on my Instagram stories, probably a little bit more than Facebook and Twitter.
One question: how come you don't have your Instagram as your name? It was super hard to find you.
Really?
Yeah. You should make it at Angel Radcliffe. No, I meant the username.
Now you're making me pull it up and look at it.
Yeah, because you have it as Miss Remba. I would change it to
Miss RMBA. Well,
RMBA.
I do have another Instagram where I secured my name because I've been using that username across social media for like 6 years. So
okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I don't want to change it. That's where everybody knows me by that username. So I'm like, I don't want to change it just yet, but I have went ahead and secured Angel Radcliffe. So just in case, whenever I do decide to transition it.
yeah, that makes sense. Cool. One more question. I like to wrap up the episode with a guided conclusion section, where I ask a question that we haven't talked about previously. It could be funny, serious, or heartbreaking. I don't know. No, but no, this question is: what's the number one step a beginner can take to creating wealth?
I would say the number one step is sitting down and having a holistic view of your finances. So understanding where you are. So whether if it's in your budget, what your overall income is, take home pay, what your investments are, and then what is your debt. So you have to have that holistic view of everything before you can even create that plan to wealth, to building wealth, I'd say.
Facts. A plan, but also education. I'd add. You definitely have to learn, first and learn on how you're gonna take those steps and plan and structure, right?
So, yeah, you got to learn, but you also have to understand where you are. So it's like you can learn all day, but then you learn it and then you log in your account. You're like, wait a minute, I didn't know I was $1 million in debt.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, hopefully you don't fall into that situation. But yeah, that's very true. Well, Angel, I appreciate you coming up on the Zoom call today to talk for a little bit. I wish we had more time to talk, but I could always just bring you back up here. Any last words to the audience?
I do. So for anyone who's listening who hasn't taken that first step to building their budget, which I always say is the foundational step to everything in finances, it's very simple. So you can start today, set those weekly reminders up on your phone to review your transactions, make sure that you're setting your goals, make sure that you are building those financial boundaries and embracing the next steps. So that's all I have. So I love to come back and discuss another topic. So this is a great conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll keep in touch. Well, you guys heard it here. This is the Misguided Podcast. We intend to guide you to a better future. My name is Juwan. Again, I'm sitting here with Angel, Radcliffe, and I'd appreciate it if you guys like and subscribe. Thank you, guys.